Hello and welcome to Champions of Inspiration. I'm your host, Scott Schilling. We're going to have another great show here. My guest today was the founder or participant and the lead in two different educational platforms up in the Great White North, up there in Canada, and then ultimately developed the mind model method of coaching and training and teaching. And so, let's learn from that because I know the minute that I met him, I started learning right away. Blair, thanks for joining us here on Champions of Inspiration.
Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate
So
it.
I remember you said when we first met that you had me profiled in the first 10 to 20 seconds.
Well, 10 to 30, yeah, depending.
Okay, 10 to 30. All right. So I didn't want to over exaggerate there.
Yeah.
So exactly how do you accomplish something like that?
Well, in my research that I did at life skills colleges, I wound up discovering a body of work called question concepts. So basically what happens was everybody thinks, but the organizational pattern is through questions, is one of the ways that I found. And it's fundamental. So how you succeed or not in life depends on the questions you ask yourself and ultimately the answers that come from that. But was there a foundational piece? And I went and I realized there's an infinite amount of questions out there, but how many fundamental types of questions are there? Well, there's really only 6: a who, what, when, where, why, and how. And that's it. And when I found that to be curious and wondered, is there any other questions other than those 6 in any other language? And other than grammatical corrections, like in the English language, you have the word which. Which one would you prefer? Get a good dictionary with derivations. Like derivations means just simply, where did the word come from? Derivative, derived from. And it'll say it's a grammatical correction for the word what. So we're still back to the same 6. And I found exactly the same thing with other words with grammatical or tense or gender descriptions in over 3,000 other languages that I looked at.
Wow.
And I couldn't find anything different out there fundamentally. People will say that it's, which is different. Well, in NLP, that's natural language processing for computers. They have 8, they have that and unspecified, but they didn't bother categorizing how question concepts actually work. And it's the conceptualization of how your brain operates. When you hear that pattern of a who, what, when, where, why, and how, and I plug it into my mind, because to me, it's pretty darn unique about how you pair that, sort of like a fingerprint, but it's your language pattern. You put that language pattern together with some keywords and phrases, and all of a sudden, you can start figuring it out, how they believe, how they operate, how they walk, talk, and quack if they're a duck. But anyway.
That's very cool. So mind modeling, the mind model method is really more about how to think than what to think.
Absolutely. Correct? Yes. There's a huge difference between, so many people for the last 50 years. I've been in this business for 45 years, and it was big when I started with mindset. It still is. Everybody talks about having a great mindset, and yet almost nobody actually ever accomplishes that. And so, I did for a brief time until my father went into a coma. He was in a coma for 14 years before he passed. And the early days of the coma, my mindset just collapsed. And for 2.5, 3 years, I thought I had a completely unshakable mindset. And then my dad went into a coma and gone. I went back to my trainer and she ran the same exercises because I was trained as a facilitator. I ran the exercises on myself. Then she ran them on me and we got the same result, is it didn't work. And then she had the gall to tell me that Blair, you just don't believe enough.
Yeah, it was just you.
It was just me. And I went, pardon me for saying it this way, but basically I was super pissed. I gave her the bird and F you very, very firmly. Like, I was not a happy camper, and I've never talked to her since. The reality of this, though, is I was already doing research at life skills colleges, and I had a scientific model that dealt with emotion and intuition, but science-based. And I followed that, and I was already partway through working on question concepts and belief systems. And I kept on breaking it down into these things that eventually got called mind models. And they were working because at the college, we had 1,000 students at our peak. 800 of them were potentially suicidal. We couldn't get it wrong. And if I went back and told them, because I was teaching mindset there too, but fortunately I had life skills, which was far more reliable, as it turned out, to rely on. And basically it worked extremely well to just bring people back to center themselves. And in 35 years, we didn't lose anybody. So,
well, so it's interesting to me. You're sharing something that I think probably to my audience, to many audiences, would be very unique. That it's not your mindset. That
it's not.
It is much deeper than that. Correct?
Yes, it's not what you believe. Belief. Don't get me wrong here. Belief is important. I'm not slamming belief, but I'm saying, hold it. So many people work on their belief all day long, and right, they believe, but it doesn't change their life, because what you need is behaviors to change in order to change your life. So how come we're taught to believe? Well, because some of the times, actually, there was a scientific study done on mindset by the and a paper that was published in the Association for Psychological Science. In there, they defined the 6 tests that big claims that mindset has, and they debunked them down to that fact. They could only find scientific proof that mindset works 1% of the time or less.
Oh,
and yeah, I know. And mind models, I didn't know that I had to test it to this level, but this was to keep people alive. We tested each of the mind models to work the first time and continue on to 80% effectiveness. That's an 8,000 times difference. It's crazy. And most people get it first time and they apply it. And if it doesn't, just do it 3 times in a row. And all of a sudden, poof, you're about at 99.9% likely that you're going to be getting resourceful. You may not have a pure solution, but you're not stuck anymore. You're not depressed. You're not focused on what doesn't work anymore. You've shifted and you're in what I call a resourceful state. And that resourceful state is resilient, it's flexible, it's dynamic, and you move forward in fluidly. And that works great for people with depression, but business people, oh my God, they take their businesses that have been stuck for 2 to 10 years or in decline, and we lift them up, like just raise their top line.
Well, I think everybody would like to understand how to do that better. And, again, I think it's a little bit of shock to hear, wait a second, just pure mindset doesn't work. And then, so how about an example of some mind model, or help people come with you to where you are, help them dig a little deeper. Absolutely. With you.
Totally. Okay, so I'll give you a slight tad of background here. It's just, wouldn't you like something that really stuck with you, that really works but sticks with you, easy to remember, and is there? Well, what would happen if you designed a mind model that was already in your brain, but at a subconscious level? Okay.
Great.
And then you leverage that up to the conscious, and then you stack 2 or 3 of them together so they got a generally predictable result. That's the 3 E's. And it's a stacked mind model that I call the 3 E's. And the first of the 3 E's is a mind model that I didn't stack them until about 3 years ago, but I was doing this for like 30 years, but I kept on saying them the same way. And all of a sudden I said, well, the same way, the same order, the same thing, I should call them something and sort of package it up. And so I called them the 3 E's, because it's effective versus ineffective. Do you want to do things that are effective, or do you want to do things that are ineffective? And what would happen if you just thought about that, the comparisons? Because word meanings are what we behave to. So beliefs, we don't necessarily know how to behave to a belief. We just feel better. Great. Okay, so you feel better. So what? Does it give you a result? No, but you believe you'll get one sooner or later. And do you? Well, 99% of the time you don't, according to the study. So therefore, maybe you want something that gives you an 80% probability. And if you just took that to the bank or went to Vegas, hey, go to Vegas with 80% odds. You got to break the bank every time. So effective versus ineffective is one of my mind models. I define it so that people do not use the words good, bad, right, wrong, better, bad. Like I've got a whole bunch of words there that are all bundled in, but the top 4 are just good, bad, right, and wrong. So just remember those. Do you want, when you're good, people have this inkling that they could be bad. And it's about them. And right, I'm wrong. It's judgment based. Well, what if we don't need to judge ourselves? What if we just said, is that effective or ineffective? See, I go, not am I being effective? We don't usually say it that way. We think of effectiveness as, does this mouse work well? Yeah, like, is that effective? Is that an effective tool for me? And the answer is, yeah, it is. It's outside of me. It's sort of like this shirt. I can change my shirt. I can change my behavior. So effective versus ineffective. I don't get hung up on, oh, this is a good shirt. No, you don't think about that. I'm good, I'm bad. But the shirt, I can change it. No big deal. So effective. By the way, if you want another word, if effective versus ineffective doesn't work for you, switch it to works or doesn't work. It's even simpler.
Okay. It is simple.
The next thing is it externally verifiable? I know that sounds complicated, but it's not. Externally verifiable versus internally verifiable. Let's take a look at internally verifiable stuff first, because that's what most people do. Beliefs are only internally verifiable. It's what you believe. I can't agree or disagree with them. I may or may not be able to see any behaviors from them. I can't know that what you're believing is correct or incorrect. And if I tell you to believe something and you tell me, I can't dispute that with you, because I can't plug myself into your brain and know, oh, that's not quite the right way to believe that. It needs to be this. And, so that's mindset,
Right.
But if you have something that's externally verifiable, then what's externally verifiable is something that can be recorded, like this presentation right now, this podcast. This is all external evidence. So It's not my opinion. It's not your opinion. You can ask me questions. I can respond. I can fill you in. And it's externally verifiable. So that's internal versus external. And if you can record it, you may not actually record it, but if it's recordable, it means it's externally verifiable.
Got it.
Okay. The last one here is evaluation versus judgment. So many people get hung up on judgment and they judge themselves to death. They beat the living crap out of themselves with, oh man, did I screw up with that? Oh my God, I can't understand why I did that. They're yelling at me again? Why are they yelling at me? I don't understand this. Sure, there's elements that can be external, but is the behavior, do you name and label? That's another mind model, by the way. Can you name and label the thing that they're complaining about, or is it just their opinion? And if it's their opinion, well, now you're feeling bad about something you can't see, do, change, view, adjust. You can't do anything about it. So you're between a rock and a hard place. But an evaluation is, oh, I can evaluate. And I use the language back to effective versus ineffective. And I go, oh, was that effective? No. So if somebody's giving you crap about something that you did, you can ask them, so what part of what I just did was effective? None of it. Well, none of it. Absolutely none of it. I showed up, didn't I? Wasn't that at least a little bit?
At least I showed up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, isn't that worth something? And they go, well, they'll usually say, well, yeah, sort of, but it wasn't very good. Well, what part of that I did wasn't very good? And we keep on getting that other person to get specific. This is another mind model, by the way. The 3 E's were effective versus ineffective, external versus internal, and evaluation versus judgment. But I'm going to throw in 2 others. One is naming, labeling that I already shared. And the last one is general versus specific. You cannot change anything that's general. And that's the biggest problem with beliefs. They're almost always general. They sound like they're specific, but they're general when you break them down, because there's nothing specific to do with it other than belief. So
is this a complete process to modify your thought process, the way you go about business to be more effective?
Absolutely. Like, one of my clients took him from a $150 million book of business, and we had a 5-year contract. We only needed 3.5 years of that to get him to $500 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And we don't change. We don't play with what you're doing, your business. We play with how you think and how your team thinks. We have a thing called, another mind model called an alignment process. He thought he had a team, a really good team. I went in there and I profiled people. That's another thing that came out of Question Concepts, is I profile people, as you mentioned, 10 to 30 seconds. And I profiled them, and I went back and I said, I'm very sorry, but you do not have a team. You don't even really have a group. What you've got is a lot of individuals running around in a different direction. And it just doesn't work. Everybody's pulling in different directions, and you're sort of stalled out, because, the third law of thermodynamics is, when you reduce the drag, you increase the thrust. So what happens is, the job of any CEO in a company should be to strike a line in the sand and to have everybody on the same half of the circle. It does not matter if the ends are pulling against each other, just so that there's nobody below that line. Everybody is on that other arc. And when you have people pulling in that arc, it goes off 90 degrees to that line, and it goes fast. So
how long does it take that modification to take place, to learn it, or to start living it, or the behaviors to change?
Well, it all depends on the size of your organization. One of the organizations I went in and I did complete corporate culture reengineering, and that took 3 years. So 18 months they had a corporate culture of fear, and they slowed down. I was teaching people and slowing that down, and they wound up also switching out. They realized they didn't have the right people in the right seats on the bus. They moved a few around, let some go, hired some new ones. And the funny thing is none of the new hires would ever relate to. They could not relate in high-level meetings. They said, like, the CEO would talk about how there was this corporate culture of fear is dissipating. And they would walk in and said, I'm sorry, but I don't see a corporate culture of fear anymore. It's gone. Yeah. And so it's updating, and then we start building back up and shifting things around. An alignment process, another one of the mind models, and you get people aligned. And that was the next 18 months, and they took off.
So what does it take for an individual to make improvement or
That
see
can happen.
noticeable difference?
Well, I worked with a client recently that had been seeing counselors and psychologists and was on some medication, so probably a psychiatrist there in the mix too. And she'd been seeing clients for at least 6.5 years, or she was a patient for 6.5 years. She was a little frustrated, and her friend, who I worked with briefly, referred her to me. And in 4 months of working with her, 1 session a week for 4 months, she was able to learn the mind models to overcome, in some cases, moderately severe anxiety. But her anxiety issues are all but a memory right now. So she's doing really well. And that's not that uncommon. It's 4 to 9 months, depending on the severity. Well, I say 3 to 9 months, depending on the severity and how rapidly how much practice time they get.
Got it. And so what if you're out on an island, you're the only one who learns this? Does it still create that grade of adder to your business and positive impact?
Well, if you're out on an island, depends if you've got a computer or not connected to the internet. If you do, then absolutely yes. If you don't, absolutely yes, because I've had Olympic athletes learn the mind models to get the focus in their brain that the stuff that they were doing with other, success psychologists, it wasn't quite working for them because they were actually, they hadn't discovered the level of self-judgment they had and the degree of perfectionism. So perfectionism is a really unhealthy mindset. But there's elements of it that are very handy to keep and build on. But to tease out the difference and to be able to evaluate what works, what doesn't work, and what to keep, what to throw away or change. And one of the cool things here is we do not focus on negatives. We focus on building replacement behaviors and thought patterns so that you can actually, it's all part of neuroplasticity. When you do that, all you need to do is practice the new one more than you're practicing the old one. And because you're having it's effective and is successful for you, you'll do more because it works. It's just that simple. We don't do things to screw up.
Yeah, I think people are inherently good or inherently wanting to move forward.
Exactly.
However we might say that. So I would agree that, if you I know it's one of the things that I love is getting feedback, because the only way you can make a modification is to know that there's something to make a modification to.
Exactly.
And so one time I had one of my clients said, "I'm stuck." I said, "Good, move." And she goes, "No, I'm stuck." I said, "Great, move." She goes, "You don't seem to understand. I'm stuck." I said, "No, I totally understand. Move." She said, "What are you saying?" I said, "Can you feel your right foot?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Move it." She goes, "Okay, I did." I said, "Good, you're not stuck." I said, "The only way you get any feedback is to do something. You have to take some kind of action." And that's why, I think that this sounds very intriguing, because I don't think anybody has purposefully taken their entire career or lifetime to learn the wrong thing.
No, they haven't, but yet they have, because somebody said, do it this way because it worked for somebody else. But when you think about how each brain is wired so uniquely, when somebody else says, do it the way that I do it and you'll get my success too, I go, how is that possible? Just understanding the brain, all of the neuroplasticity that goes on, it's possible, but it's improbable, because the patterns that you have in your brain are not going to be the same that I have in mine. But yet, if we have the same root meanings of words and we behave to those root meanings, then what if I actually help you define how to define those words tighter, that hence the mind model, it's a model, that you probably do mostly correct right now, maybe even 100%, but it's subconscious. Raise that up to the conscious, and all of a sudden you have choice. Whereas before it's like you're saying move the foot. Well, we have a mind model that is similar to that, and it's called FAIL, F-I-A-L. First, F-A, first attempt in learning is fail.
Right. Right.
You have to fail. And there's science that's called, in learning, it's called the J curve. And it goes down and up and around. So the first thing that you do when you learn something new is you feel stupid and dumb. Okay, because I don't get this, I don't understand. You're right, you're supposed to. Now, the interesting part is that confusion is the confusion of neuropeptides flooding your brain with a sense of neuropeptides are the chemicals of emotion. Okay, so they go into your brain, they're there, and this is scientific fact. You have to feel confused for your brain to grow new ganglia. So it's not going to spend more energy just growing ganglia, when you're not confused, because what's the point? You got it figured out. But when you get confused, that's the trigger for your brain to grow new ganglia. That creates the synapse connection. That creates this whole thing that takes about 20 minutes to tease out of a learning curve where you feel stupid and really stupid and dumb. And then you start doing something, and then you practice more, and you sort of go at some tipping point, you start going, I think I got it. I got to try this out. Then you got to do it, and you start getting really good at it. And then you get really functionally good at it. And then it sort of like fades a little bit, but you're now at a new plateau. And now you're ready for your next learning. That can take anywhere from about 45 minutes overall to months or years, like however much. And usually the month, a year one is just a whole bunch of those J curves. So
it's really fascinating to hear and think through. And it makes sense when you sit there and say, well, you've got to, the body is an amazing thing. The brain is an amazing thing. It will manufacture and remanufacture and regrow and do so many different things.
And actually prune as well. So what the weird thing is, people like if you have an ineffective behavior that's not working for you, and you've practiced an effective replacement behavior, guess what? You have a tougher and tougher time remembering what didn't work for you, because your brain will just prune that normally. It won't.
But you can't unlearn, can you?
No, if you actively attempt to unlearn, you can't do that ever.
Right.
Because then you're practicing the thing that you want to forget. And the brain, the subconscious brain doesn't handle negatives. It doesn't learn. It doesn't like saying, I don't want to do that. It sort of goes, I want to do that subconsciously. Your prefrontal cortex is the thing that applies the I want to or don't want to, like those type of things, or I don't want to do that. Yeah. So that's what that is.
Like I say, I think it's a fascinating topic, especially if you're wanting to learn. And one of the things that I was talking to somebody yesterday and just suggested that as you become more mature, code word for older, it's actually a good, it's actually a very positive thing to keep on learning, keep on striving, because the body, the brain is an amazing thing. You can modify when you make the decision to modify.
Yes.
It's just amazing what can happen.
Yeah.
So I love this. Hard to believe that we've burned through our time already.
Oh my God.
I think it's fascinating. How do people get a hold of you, and how do they learn more?
Well, I don't know if they can actually take a picture of that, but that's a QR code to my website. And the website is rewiringthemindcom. And that gets into some interesting things. I have profiling on there. I have one of my core competencies, which is how to rewire your mind for wealth, is there. It's got 63 of the mind models in that training. I do mind model method coach training. That's coming up again this fall. And I do another thing called IBC. IBC stands for Igniting the Buying Conversation. And that's happening September 14th through 16th, and then 21st through 23rd. And then the mind model method coach training is starting the following weekend and going September 28th to October 1st. But it also breaks it up into 2 4-day sessions. The IBC is 2 3-day sessions, but there's time for the coach training 21st through to October 1st, or 28th, I should say, of September to October 1st, and October 15th through to the 18th. And then there's actually another 8 weeks that follows, so people can integrate and get certified as a coach.
Awesome. Blair Dunkley, thank you for sharing this today. We'll have to do it again. We just didn't have enough time.
There's so much more. I mean, you want to go into mental health. I've got decades of mental health issues, business, leveraging people, just focusing on that. It's crazy.
Yeah, we'll have to set up another time for sure. Blair, thanks for being here so much.
Really appreciate it, Scott. Thanks.
Absolutely. And thank all of you for joining us here on Champions of Inspiration. See you again tomorrow, exact same time. God bless.
Bye for now.